every day, somewhere between 9 a.m. and noon. You pass or fail a test you don't even know is happening. It's called a compliance probe, and once you see it, you can never be tested the same way again. I'm going to show you exactly how this works. And I need you to stay with me because what I'm about to walk you through is something I spent years training people to do to other people. And now I'm going to show you how it's being done to you. By the end of this video, you're going to understand 6 mechanisms, 6 layers of invisible testing that happen to you every single day. And once you see them, you will never interact with another human being the same way. You will never click another button the same way. You will never answer another question the same way. This isn't theory. This is doctrine, and it's running on you right now. Let me start with something that happened in Korea in the early 1950s. During the war, American POWs were held in camps where something very strange started happening. Men who had been trained to resist interrogation, men who knew the tricks, started complying with requests that 6 months earlier they would have died before agreeing to. They signed confessions. They wrote letters denouncing their own country. They informed on each other. And here's the part that broke the intelligence community when they studied it later. These men weren't tortured in the way you'd expect. They weren't beaten into submission. They were complied into submission. The method was called progressive commitment. And it worked like this. A guard would ask a prisoner a trivial question, something so small that refusing it would seem insane. Can you tell me what day it is? Can you confirm your serial number? Can you hold this pen for a second while I tie my boot? The prisoner complies because the request is harmless. Then the next day, a slightly larger request. Can you write your name on this paper? Can you read this sentence out loud? Can you carry this box from here to there? Each request is just barely bigger than the last one. And each one uses the previous compliance as a psychological foundation. Within weeks, men who would have spit in their captor's face were writing propaganda. And when researchers studied this after the war, they found something that changed behavioral science forever. The human brain does not experience compliance as a series of individual decisions. It experiences compliance as a trajectory. Once you say yes to something small, your brain recalibrates what yes means. And the next request doesn't feel bigger. It feels like the same size as the last one. That's not a bug. That's how we're built. And the people who understand this are using it on you every single day. Now, here's where this gets personal. You think you're making independent choices all day long. You think you're in control of what you agree to and what you refuse. And on the surface, that feels true. But I'm going to show you that between 9 a.m. and noon, you are run through a compliance calibration sequence so precise that by lunchtime, your obedience threshold has been tested, mapped, and logged, and you never noticed it happening. I'm going to break down the 6 mechanisms, and I need you to listen carefully because each one of these is designed to be invisible. The entire system only works if you don't know it's a system. Number 1 is the morning prime. This is the softest, smallest ask you'll encounter all day. And it almost always happens in the first 30 minutes after you start interacting with the world. It could be an app asking you to rate your sleep. It could be a notification asking if you want to enable a feature. It could be your partner asking if you saw their keys. It could be a coworker saying, "Hey, do you have a second?" The content of the request does not matter. What matters is that it is low stakes, easy to agree to, and happens early. Here's the mechanism. Your brain is most neuroplastic in the first 90 minutes after waking. That's when your reticular activating system is deciding what patterns to prioritize for the rest of the day. If the first social interaction you have is a small compliance, your brain tags the day as a compliance day. You just primed yourself to say yes, and you don't even know you did it. I'll say that again. If the first request you agree to in the morning is compliance-shaped, you've just set your threshold for the rest of the day. And that's the first mechanism. Number 2 is the escalation anchor. This happens about an hour after the morning prime, and it's where the request gets bigger, but only by a degree that feels reasonable given what you already agreed to. If you enabled notifications on that app, now the app is asking you to share your location. If you told your coworker you had a second, now they're asking if you can look at a document. If you helped your partner find their keys, now they're asking if you can drive them somewhere. The size of the second request is not random. It's calibrated. It's just big enough that if it were the first request, you'd hesitate. But because it's the second request, it feels like a continuation. Your brain doesn't process it as a new decision. It processes it as finishing what you already started. And that's the escalation anchor. You're not agreeing to a new thing. You're staying consistent with the thing you already agreed to. And here's the part most people miss. The second request is not about getting you to do the thing. It's about finding out where your threshold is. If you say yes, they know they can go bigger. If you say no, they know they push too far and they recalibrate. Either way, they just learned something about you. And that's the second layer. Number 3 is the guilt gap. This is where the system gets psychological. If you said no to the escalation anchor, you now have a tiny amount of cognitive dissonance. You helped with the first thing, but you refused the second thing. And your brain does not like inconsistency. So what happens next is predictable. Within the next 20 to 40 minutes, you'll encounter another small request. Smaller than the escalation anchor, closer in size to the morning prime, and this time, you're more likely to say yes because your brain is trying to resolve the guilt of having said no. If you said yes to the escalation anchor, the guilt gap works differently. Now you've agreed to 2 things, and your brain is looking for a reason to justify why you're being so agreeable. So the next request will feel like an opportunity to prove to yourself that you're level, cooperative, a team player, a good partner. Either way, the third request is not about the task. It's about exploiting the emotional residue of the first 2. I've trained interrogators in this. I've seen this used in sales environments, in relationships, in military psyops, in corporate culture. The guilt gap is the highest yield mechanism in the entire sequence because it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like your own idea. And that's how you know it's working. Number 4 is the reciprocity frame. This one is elegant because it flips the script. Somewhere between the third and fourth interaction, the person or system running the sequence does something for you. They answer a question you had. They send you a link you needed. They compliment you. They give you a small piece of value. And now your brain is in debt mode. Reciprocity is one of the oldest social contracts in the human species. If someone gives you something, you are biologically wired to give something back. It's not optional. It's a mammalian brain function. So when the next request comes, and it will come within minutes of the reciprocity frame, you're not evaluating the request on its merits. You're evaluating it as repayment. And that is a completely different decision-making process. The request could be absurd. It could be something you would never agree to in isolation. But because it comes right after they did you a favor, your brain experiences refusal as betrayal. And most people cannot tolerate that feeling. So they comply. And that's the fourth pressure point. Number 5 is the sunk cost lock. By now, you've said yes 3 or 4 times. You've been primed, escalated, guilt-gapped, and reciprocity framed. And the fifth mechanism is the simplest one. You've invested so much compliance already that walking away now feels like wasting all of it. You've been helpful for 2 hours. You've been cooperative. You've been agreeable. And your brain does not want to admit that all of that was manipulation. So it reframes all of it as your choice. And the next request, even if it's the biggest one yet, gets processed as just one more step in a direction you've already committed to. This is why people stay in bad relationships. This is why employees agree to uncompensated overtime. This is why you keep scrolling an app that makes you feel like shit. It's not that the thing is good. It's that stopping now would mean admitting that everything up until now was a waste. And your brain will do almost anything to avoid that admission. And that's the fifth layer. Number 6 is the identity seal. This is the end game. This is where compliance stops being something you do and becomes something you are. After a full sequence, you don't just agree to requests anymore. You start to self-identify as someone who agrees to requests. You're helpful. You're easygoing. You're a yes person. And once that identity is installed, you don't need to be asked anymore. You'll volunteer. The system trained you to comply. And then it convinced you that complying was your personality. And now you'll defend it. If someone points out that you're being taken advantage of, you'll say no. I'm just helpful. If someone suggests you're being manipulated, you'll say no. I just like being cooperative. The compliance is now self-sustaining. And that's how the sequence ends. Not with a single big ask, but with you becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be asked. I'll say that one more time. The goal is not to get you to say yes to one thing. The goal is to turn you into someone who says yes automatically. And that's the 6th mechanism. Now here's what makes this so dangerous. This sequence doesn't just run once, it runs every day. And it runs in parallel across multiple systems. Your phone is running it. Your workplace is running it. Your relationships are running it. Ads are running it. Algorithms are running it. And because each sequence is invisible, you think you're just having a normal day. But you're not. You're being calibrated. Every small yes is data. Every hesitation is data. Every refusal is data. And the system is learning your threshold in real time. It's learning what time of day you're most compliant. It's learning what kind of language works on you. It's learning whether you respond better to guilt or reciprocity. And it's optimizing. This is not paranoia. This is behavioral economics. This is A/B testing. This is conversion rate optimization. This is the same science that gets you to click buy now or swipe right or stay on the platform for one more hour. The only difference is that most people think that science is just about selling products. It's not. It's about calibrating obedience. And the product being sold is your compliance itself. Now you might be thinking, okay, but I can just start saying no. And you're right to think that, but here's why it's deeper than that. Saying no to a single request is easy. Saying no to a sequence is cognitively exhausting. Because every no requires you to override a pattern your brain has already started building. And your brain hates that. It burns energy. It creates stress. It makes you feel like you're being difficult. So what most people do is they say yes to the small stuff to conserve energy for the big stuff. But that's the trap. Because the big stuff never announces itself as big stuff. It shows up disguised as just one more small thing in a sequence you already agreed to. And by the time you realize it was big, you've already said yes. So what do you actually do about this? I'm going to give you 3 paths. Not solution. Paths. Because there is no way to completely opt out of this system without opting out of society. But you can change how you move through it. Path 1 is pattern recognition. Start tracking your yeses. Not obsessively, just pay attention. Notice when you agree to something in the first hour of your day. Notice when a second request comes right after the first. Notice when someone does you a favor and then immediately asks for something. Notice when you feel guilty for saying no. You don't have to change your behavior yet. Just see the pattern. Because once you see it, the system loses half its power. It only works in the dark. Path 2 is threshold defense. Decide in advance what your boundaries are. Not in the moment. In advance, because in the moment, you're already in the sequence and your brain is already compromised. But if you've decided ahead of time that you don't enable location services or that you don't answer work messages before 9 a.m., or that you don't agree to favors that require more than 10 minutes, then you're not making a decision in the moment. You're just enforcing a rule you already made. And that takes almost no willpower. Path 3 is sequence disruption. This is the most advanced one. When you notice a sequence starting, you intentionally break it. You say yes to the first request, and then you say no to the second one, even if the second one is reasonable. Not because the request is bad, but because you're refusing to let the pattern complete. You're teaching the system that you are unpredictable. And unpredictable people are expensive to calibrate. So the system stops trying as hard. I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm saying it's possible. And I'm saying that the alternative is spending the rest of your life being a test subject in a compliance experiment you didn't consent to. Here's what I know. The system is not going away. The people running these sequences are not going to stop. Because it works. And because most people will never see it. But you're not most people anymore. You've seen the 6 mechanisms. You know what a compliance probe looks like. You know what the morning prime is. You know what the escalation anchor does. You know how the guilt gap works. You know what reciprocity framing feels like. You know what the sunk cost lock is. And you know what the identity seal does. And now every time someone asks you for something small, you're going to pause for half a second, and in that half second, you're going to ask yourself a question you never asked before. Is this request isolated, or is this request the first move in a sequence? And that question changes everything. When a population sees the machinery, compliance becomes expensive. I'll say that again. When a population sees the machinery, compliance becomes expensive. Right now, your compliance is cheap. It costs them almost nothing to calibrate you. But the moment you start seeing the pattern, the cost goes up. Because now they have to work harder. They have to be more sophisticated. They have to hide the sequence better. And eventually, it stops being worth it. You're not going to overthrow the system by saying no to everything. But you can make yourself expensive. And expensive people get left alone. That's the play. I've never said this publicly before, but I'll say it now. I've spent years on both sides of this. I've run these sequences. I've trained people to run these sequences. And I've had these sequences run on me And the only difference between the people who stay trapped in the pattern and the people who break out is this. The people who break out saw it once. Just once. And they couldn't unsee it. You just saw it. What you do with that is up to you.